Scripture to Sermon, Part 2. This podcast covers a method of Bible study. It requires no knowledge of Accordance Bible software, Hebrew, or Greek. In the last episode, we covered moving from an idea for a sermon to studying the passage. Today, in Part 2, we'll look at studying an individual paragraph in depth and building the actual sermon. In the last podcast, number 143, we covered how to move from just having an idea for a sermon to locating the verse and its context. We also looked at how to decide whether a passage was a suitable match for a particular topic and how to proceed if it wasn't. In our case, we decided the passage did support our topic, so we stuck with the original concept and agreed to study the passage. After selecting the best commentaries and reviewing their introductory information, we then considered how to limit our sermon to a manageable length. In this case, we agreed to limit our study to a paragraph. By that point, we were out of time, so that's where we'll start today. We're actually going to study two paragraphs, verses 12 through 18, since both are included in this section of our outline. This is really where the hard work of exegesis begins, and where we should begin taking extensive notes. Since this is an expository sermon, the outline of the passage will be the outline of the sermon. That's true whether we take our outline from the Preacher's Outline and Sermon Bible, some alternate resource, or construct it ourselves. Anyway, this is the time to copy it into a user tool, the place where we'll actually construct our sermon. Then we'll begin our verse-by-verse study, reading each verse closely, investigating its details, and checking the commentaries that now appear in our info pane. We need to be sure to keep our notes organized verse by verse too, and the best way to do so is to record them into Accordance's user notes. First, let's adjust the display to show just the verses in our outline. Now we'll open a user tool, I have one just for sermons, and copy and paste our outline into it. Now we're not going to need this tool for a while, so let's move it into a back tab to save some space. We're almost ready to read the passage closely. I like to eliminate everything but the text when I do, so let's remove the outline and even the info pane. The best Accordance feature to assist us in our reading is the highlight palette. We'll make room for it on our screen, then open and detach it. Some people like to use color highlighting and underlines. Others, inductive Bible study symbols. Accordance provides us with both, and frankly, I prefer to blend the two of them, like so. I also recommend we record any insights we have into the text in this process. A user note is the appropriate place, so let's open one. I'll jot down an insight. There. Now we'll add a few more highlights, and we're done. The next step is to investigate the details in our passage. While time won't permit us to work through the entire passage, let's see if we can use some representative techniques as examples. First up is the word search. We can see the definition of the original Greek word by holding down our Command key, if we're on a Mac, or Control key on a PC. The definition appears in the Instant Detail pane. If the information looks useful, we can then just triple-click to open the entire article in a new tab. This is the Mounce Greek Dictionary, which comes with every Accordance 11 collection. We'll copy its brief definition as a citation, and then paste it into our note for verse 13. If I don't click Update in the Edit window, it will remain open, which is an easy way to insert information from multiple sources. Here's what I mean. We'll return to the dictionary, then click on this link to the Mounce Expository Dictionary article. Again, we'll copy information from it, select our Edit window from the window menu, and paste it. Now let's check this reference to NIDNet. More good information. so we'll copy it too. Shift triple-click will search for an article on this word in our default Bible dictionary. Apparently, there isn't an article entitled Tempted in Erdman's, so it searched for the word in the English content field. Let's see if we can do a bit better. We'll switch back to the main entry field, then see if there's an article on tempt. No, but here's one on temptation. Perfect. Let's go to it. More good information. We won't complete this word study now. Simply paste this last bit of information into our user note. However, I think this is enough that we can understand how the process works. Investigate the word, acquire good information, paste it into a note for that verse so we can harvest it later in our sermon. It occurs to me that we might need to label these quotes with the word we've been studying, so we'll type it here. There, our note on this verse is complete. Here's what it looks like in the user note. There's another word in the next verse I think we might want to examine. Desire. I see that it's the start of this downward spiral that James describes here. This time we'll add the Option or Alt key to our Command or Control click, so Instant Details appears in a pop-up. Whoa, this is more good stuff. I think we'll want every bit of it. All we have to do to copy both articles is to press the Shift key. That freezes Instant Details. Then we click the clipboard icon here to copy it. We'll paste this into our note for this verse, like so. The last thing we're going to do is to place a Bible icon under each of the words we studied. That's how I indicate that I've studied a particular word. Let's shift gears for a moment and look at the info pane. First introduced in Accordance 11, it has rapidly become one of our users' favorite features. It displays only material relevant to the verse on which it's focused. Commentaries, cross-references, topics, parallel passages, and so on. Normally, that verse is the topmost one in the search results pane. However, we can shift the focus of the info pane by using Command-click Mac or Control-click PC. For instance, if we Command-click here in verse 15, the info pane's focus shifts to verse 15. Verse 17, it shifts to verse 17. This technique is really helpful when we want to see our entire passage while we study individual verses. Option or Alt plus click on one of the commentary's covers or titles opens it to the precise verse under study so we can preview it. If we find good information, clicking it opens it in a parallel pane. Here's a comment I found helpful, so once again we'll copy it as a citation and insert it into the note for our verse. We then update it, then dismiss it, check the next commentary, and so on. The Topics section lets us open relevant Bible dictionary articles with a simple click. Holding the Shift key down while we click searches the entire Bible for that topic. Both of these provide good, solid information. Cross-references are great for reinforcing ideas that are unfamiliar, as they summon other voices in the Bible to join the discussion. And so we proceed verse by verse, examining each of the verses in our passage, collecting information, taking good notes, and gradually building our understanding of the passage. The info pane in Accordance 11 offers a quick, easy way to investigate many of the details in a verse. However, if you would like to do a more thorough investigation, these 5 how-to podcasts are all available at this link. In the next step, we'll be building our sermon in a user tool. So how is a sermon built? At this point, it's really a matter of assembling the parts we've already collected. As mentioned, we'll be constructing it in an Accordance user tool. The first part of the sermon, the introduction, is where we earn the right to be heard. It combines the commentary's description of the original audience's situation and need with our knowledge of our congregation's situation and need. The major points come next, and as we already saw, they're going to come from the preacher's outline and study Bible or some alternate, while the explanatory material under each point will come from our verse-by-verse notes and our user notes. As you remember, we recorded our notes from reading closely, investigating details, and checking commentaries. Our audience will more easily grasp the sermon if we weave in illustrations from daily life, particularly if we choose ones that are relevant to them. The conclusion should summarize the sermon and suggest appropriate action steps. Once again, these are best if they come from our knowledge of the congregation, but if we need help here, the best sources are the application or devotional commentaries, several of which were probably included among the best commentaries we've already added to our info pane. After all our hard work, the process of constructing our sermon is actually pretty easy. First, we'll move our sermon outline back into its own zone. I've worked off camera on it quite a bit, updating it and clarifying it with my new understanding of this passage. You may want to pause the podcast here for a moment to look over those changes and compare it with the original outline. The biggest change is that I included the first verse of this paragraph in the section and changed my verse search to display the new passage selection. I've never been real comfortable splitting paragraphs to construct a message, and it turns out that this sentence is an important part of this passage. I also added an introduction. The reason for this section of James didn't seem to me to be rooted in a specific occasion or an event in the original audience. Rather, it seemed to address the general condition of all humanity, so I tried to make that clear in my intro. Finally, I added a conclusion with action steps, 2 commands and a promise. There are 2 imperative verbs in this passage. Both of them command us to do something, or rather not to do something. First, do not be deceived about God's pure nature, verse 16. And 2, never claim that God is the source of temptation, verse 13. The promise is reason for encouragement, which seems to be another purpose of the passage. It's in the first line of the paragraph, the one I added back into this passage. God blesses those who resist temptation with eternal life. Because of that promise, we can rejoice even in the midst of temptation. Now, let's fill in the explanations of each major point from our verse-by-verse notes. I've opened the edit window of my user tool and adjusted the size of my workspace for this next segment. Stacking the 2 windows like this enables us to shift between the workspace and the edit window with a simple click. The word temptation is going to need defined at the outset, so let's put the results of our word study here under the first main point. Several of these resources are worth quoting exactly, so we'll copy and paste those here. Just how much information one puts into the sermon notes is a matter of individual preference. I tend to use very sparse notes, unless I'm quoting someone. I've known others who write their sermon out in its entirety. We'll try to strike a balance between the 2 today. Under point 2, it seems worth reminding everyone of the 10th commandment, thou shalt not covet, Exodus 20:17. Seems human nature doesn't change. However, we'll also want to make the point that temptation itself is not a sin. At what point does it become a sin? Jesus, at Matthew 5:27, indicates that sin can be either sustained willful thought or action. I'll put that verse here as well. Let's insert just one more note before we wrap up this section. James 1:16 refers to God as the Father of lights. Beyond the obvious reference to God's creation of the sun, moon, and stars in Genesis 1, He is also the source of everything that's pure, a Father of moral light. In fact, He is so pure, nothing impure can flow from Him, including temptation. Alas, we humans lack such a sterling nature, as evidenced even by our speech at James 3:6 and following. I hope this has been enough examples for you to see how to merge the results of our verse-by-verse research into our sermon outline. This wraps up the final step of our sermon preparation, except, of course, for the prayer we'll put into it between its completion and its actual delivery. I know many compassionate, godly pastors who still struggle with preparing their weekly sermons. If you're among them, I hope this two-part series will be of some help to you. Thank you for your hard work in caring for the people of God. This has been Dr. J for Accordance Bible Software. Thank you for watching this episode of Lighting the Lamp.